Hey, welcome to Transform Your Workplace. I'm Brandon Laws. This show is all about practical conversations with experts who help us build better workplaces. No fluff, no corporate jargon, just real strategies you can actually use. Before we get into today's episode, a quick word about our sponsor, Xenium HR. If your HR and payroll are scattered across multiple vendors who don't talk to each other, you already know the problem. Every payroll question leads to 5 more questions for HR. Every employee change triggers a waterfall of paperwork. And you're stuck in the middle trying to manage it all. Xenium brings HR, payroll, and benefits together in one place, backed by a dedicated service team, so you can stop managing the chaos and get back to growing your business. Learn more at xeniumhr.com. All right, today's guest is Guy Winch. He's a psychologist and author of the new book, Mind Over Grind, How to Break Free When Work Hijacks Your Life. And this one hit close to home for me. Here's what we get into in today's conversation. Guy explains why the most passionate, high-functioning professionals are often the last to realize work has taken over their lives. He shares a simple reframe that can help you stop procrastinating on tasks you've been avoiding for days. We talk about what he calls the Goldilocks zone of stress, and how to know when you've tipped from performing well into self-sabotage. He gives a practical technique for shutting off work rumination in the evenings so you can actually be present at home. And we dig into the idea of role curation, which is how you can take charge of your own career growth even when your manager isn't helping. Really enjoyed my conversation with Guy. It's packed with exercises and strategies you could start using right away. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Guy Winch. Guy, it is a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're out with a new book. It's called Mind Over Grind, How to Break Free When Work Hijacks Your Life. It was out February 10th, and you opened the book with a pretty vulnerable story about mocking in neighbors, panic in an elevator, only to later realize you were probably suffering from deep burnout yourself. Why do you think high-functioning professionals, even mental health experts, are often the last ones to realize the work has hijacked their lives?
First of all, because it happens really in kind of insidious ways and in very unconscious ways. And I think most people don't realize the extent to which work takes over and influences and impacts and does damage in all these areas of your life. As a mental health professional, to my defense, I shall say that that story happened. It was literally after the first year of my practice. So it was many years ago. We did not study a sentence about burnout in graduate school. It's not a topic one covers. I mean, it'll come up potentially if you're working with clients, but how many clients are you working with in graduate school? Like 5? In other words, you're not doing that much. So it's not something that was in my awareness. But the other thing that reason I missed it, and many other people do, is I thought, well, I like what I do. I'm not at risk for burnout. And also I was only a year in. I'm not at risk for burnout, but we actually know that, the more passionate you are about what you do, the more you can lose sight of how much you're working versus how many areas of your life are going unattended. And so, it's something we very much miss. We don't expect also that where to look for burnout is at home, which is where you can find a lot of these influences and the damage. And so that's not something we associate with, we look for burnout at work, but, a lot of it happens at home.
You talk about this idea of survival mode where we really focus on much of our basic needs like rent and food, and that self-reflection, long-term planning, they take a back seat. So how does staying in that mode way too long compromise our ability to do our jobs well?
Well, look, survival mode is something I was doing it at the time because I was a starving graduate student, and and I was in school all the time, and I just didn't have enough money to, for some necessities, which some people, there were some things going on there that were difficult. But just look at anyone who's working a job and a side gig and then getting home to kids or caretaking, and they do not have a moment for themselves. They're basically just getting up in the morning, putting their head down and just getting it done, hopefully, that they're getting it done. And what that does is it just puts you in autopilot all day. And it numbs you out. You literally don't have time. And unless you are aware that actually you really need to find the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes to pause and actually be more thoughtful about not just the larger picture, but about your day and how you can manage yourself more effectively in a more healthy way within it, you are likely to fall into all the traps that I then talk about in this book, because it's really amazing that when we go on autopilot, how likely we are to fly our plane right into the face of a mountain.
I mean, personally, I resonate with this point so much because I've got a full-time job. I've actually been building a business on the side too, which is basically a second full-time job. My kids are in their early teens. So I'm feeling in autopilot, and I've actually, the long-term planning has taken a backseat for me. And it's interesting how you get in that mode, and it's hard to get out of it.
And you know how you get in that mode? You go like, well, okay, but this is a busy period.
Exactly.
This is going to be challenging for a week or for a month or till after I, launch that project or once the business gets started. By the way, don't know what the business is, but once you start it, then you have to grow it. Yep. Then you actually have to run it. In other words, but we keep cheating ourselves. We keep lying to ourselves and saying, okay, this is the bigger hill. And then I'll be able to, take a break, or I just need to get that promotion. But that can take a very, very long time. And we need to really think of it as a marathon, and we really need to have those refueling stations. If anyone has never run a marathon or watched one, there are refueling stations frequently. Right. No one, not professional nor amateur, runs it start to finish without actually taking aboard many nutrients, drinks, etc. And amateur runners will often pause for pictures because, again, you can't just constantly run all the time without pausing. So we need to think about life and work life in that way. Like, where are we refueling? Where are we making sure we're not running on empty? Where are we making sure we won't hit the wall?
I love your Goldilocks zone theory regarding stress. And I think most of us probably think of stress as bad, but the way you say it, it actually can improve functioning up to a point. Can you explain that tipping point where good stress suddenly turns into self-sabotage?
Yeah, look, first of all, if there's no stress at all, you're not going to bring forth your first effort. The stakes aren't that high, whatever. So your performance is not going to be that great. But as there's more pressure on you to perform, then you're going to start paying more attention and you're going to start doing better. And there's the area, roughly like when it's a bell curve, it's towards the top of that curve, where there's just enough pressure for you to really do really, really well. But if there's too much pressure, once it passes that Goldilocks zone where you do your best work, then there starts to be too much. And then what happens is we start to mismanage the stress. And we inadvertently start doing things that make the stress work and that are going to compound our mistakes, are going to make us do the wrong things, react in the wrong ways, miss certain things, default to kind of habits that don't serve us. And then our performance and our functioning is going to start to drop, and sometimes precipitously. And people always say to me like, well, my work is just stressful. I can't eliminate it. No one is asking you to eliminate it. You just need to bring it down enough to slip back into that Goldilocks zone or near it, where you're doing your best work and you're not actually sabotaging yourself.
I didn't know this, but you wrote in the book that more strokes happen on Mondays than any other workday. And for those that get like the Sunday blues or the Sunday scaries, you suggest doing a brain hack of layering a pleasant activity between the weekend and the work week. Why do you think it's so important to like this message to your brain that you're looking forward to something on Monday morning?
Because look, our brain evolved to warn us from danger, to anticipate threats. And no matter how you might feel about your work, the work week for many people is an anticipated threat. It just means that you go from being able to, be the master of your time and do the things you want as much as possible to like having to show up and perform, and that can be stressful for many people. So a lot of people have these, the Sunday blues, the Sunday scaries, whatever we call them, different things in which they start to feel this, rising sense of dread on Sundays. Often ruins their weekend and ruins a perfectly good Sunday afternoon and an evening, by the way, which they could be continuing to enjoy, but now they're just this anticipatory dread mode. And that's your brain going like, this thing at work is coming. Monday's coming. And it's enough to kind of layer something pleasant on Monday morning that you can look forward to doing. It's not just about, okay, I'll have breakfast with a friend. You then actually have to message your brain, because this is our unconscious mind doing it. You can't speak directly to your unconscious mind, but you can message things to it by saying, I am so looking forward to seeing my friend on Monday morning. Oh, yay, Monday comes. I get to do this. Or on Monday, I have my favorite breakfast. That's how I start the week. I indulge and I have my favorite breakfast. That's something I really look forward to. Or I bought this new outfit and I'm going to wear that on Monday and feel so good about myself. And when you do those things, you're actually putting something in there on Monday that you're looking forward to. And then your brain is much less likely to make all your Sunday be about, the dread of like Monday's coming, the work week's coming.
Yeah, that's good advice, because I think for a lot of people, it probably kicks in about 4 or 5 p.m. on Sunday where they just feel that dread of Monday. But if they, to your point, if they have something to look forward to, like that right. favorite breakfast before work starts on Monday, it probably rewires your brain in a lot of ways.
It really helps.
Procrastination is a huge topic for our listeners and for myself. And you argue it isn't about avoiding a task, but about avoiding the unsettling emotions that those tasks evoke. How can we use the power of nuisance to stop a stressful task from occupying our mental bandwidth all day?
It's an interesting thing, right? Because when we have the things we tend to procrastinate on, I have to write this difficult email. Or I have to do the expense report and I hate, the accounting part of it. Who knows where those receipts are, or whatever the thing is that you're going to procrastinate on. It's not just that the task is unpleasant, but you're generating and you're helping generating by framing it as like, that task that I hate doing. So you are creating this really unpleasant feeling of, this really obnoxious thing is awaiting me. And who wants to deal with the obnoxious thing? You want to actually let's not do the obnoxious thing right now. But what that does is you just took a task that could take 15 minutes potentially of, not fun, but 15 minutes, and you supersized the time you spent thinking and fretting about it into a whole week. Because yes, maybe you pushed it off until Friday, but not in one fell swoop, like I'll do it tomorrow, then tomorrow, I have this thing to do, God, I really don't like doing that. I'll push it off again. You supersize the stress associated with it. And then as it comes down to the wire and closer, you keep, now you're being upset with yourself. I really have to do that. I'm so not looking forward to it. You like take something bad and you smear it over the entire week unnecessarily. Now the impulse, I understand it. You framed it as obnoxious. So you want to avoid things that are obnoxious. So I'm suggesting, frame it as a nuisance, because it is a nuisance. But nuisances, how we associate to them, nuisances are things like pebbles in your shoes, or a fly on your neck, or an annoying tag, in your collar. Nuisances we take care of right away. We don't. That pebble, I'll get rid of that later on this afternoon if you're walking somewhere. No, let me stop right now and take that out of my shoe because it's annoying me. Mm-hmm. So if you keep thinking of the obnoxious tasks that you tend to push off and procrastinate on as nuisances, reframe them as nuisances, you're much more likely to tackle them, and it's going to be much less unpleasant to tackle them because they're not these horribly obnoxious things that you really can't stand doing. They're nuisances. They're annoying, but they're irritating, but let me just get rid of it.
In chapter 2, you write about the difference between a challenge state and a threat state. So if somebody's heading into a high-stakes situation and feeling like they're in a threat mindset, how can they use the exercise that you call the mind whisperer to flip a switch in their brain?
So it's interesting. This is based on the prevailing theory in sports psychology. That there's a ton of research that's gone into it. But what that research shows is quite remarkable when you think about it. It's because there is a very specific difference, and it sounds like a nuance, but it's critical, between going in thinking, I am going to smash this. I'm going to do so well at that. I'm going to go in and kill it. And thinking like, I hope I do well, but I just don't want to do badly. I hope I hope I don't lose, rather than I am going to win. They sound the same. Not losing and winning, by definition, are the same. But the nuance there, the focus, will make a ton of difference in your mindset, in your brain chemistry, in the hormones that you're releasing in your body. Your physiology responds differently to the feeling of I'm going to go in and smash it, and the feeling of like I hope it goes well, but I don't want it to go badly. It's such a nuance. And what happens is that when we get stressed out or worried about certain tasks or certain events at work, we start to flip from the challenge state, and the challenge state means that you're rising to the challenge, to the threat state of like, uh-oh, I hope this doesn't go badly. And that's when you're going to second guess. And that's when you're not going to bring your best to the fore. And that's when you're going to literally trip yourself up. And so it's that nuance is really, really important. And you have to manage your mindset by, not saying to yourself, and everyone has said this, like, oh man, this is not going to go well, or I'm dreading this presentation, or like, gee, I hope I don't embarrass myself, or, we've all done that. You are psyching yourself out.
Absolutely.
In doing so. What you have to message to yourself when you have the stressful or scary task is like, this is a stressful thing, but I can manage it. I have prepared well, so this might be difficult, but boy, did I prepare. Boy, do I have all the right skill sets. I've done great in this before. I can do great again. You really have to think in ways that predispose you to see it as you're much more likely to smash this thing and kill this thing than you are to stumble over it.
The mind whispering exercise, does this really happen in the moment, or is it more of a visualization ahead of whatever situation you're walking into? Or could it be both?
It's in prep. Look, the mind, whenever you're trying, when I say mind whisper, what do I mean? I mean that you're trying to message your unconscious mind.
Yeah.
Because we can't, again, we can speak to it as much as we want. It's not going to listen because it's not a self-organized entity. It's just, heuristics really. So how do we influence them when there's no one there to actually listen? Just kind of messaging we give ourselves. That's the idea of the whispering. And so it happens all along. And the preparation is like, oh yeah, I'm glad I'm preparing. Now I really feel like I'm on top of this. You want to message yourself those kind of encouraging, the things that kind of your coach would tell you when you had a good workout kind of thing. And then right before, you want to give yourself the pep talk, like, yeah, I'm really prepared. I know how to do this. It's going to be great, etc. And then, right, and even in the moment, you want to, try and focus on like, I know myself, I have the skill set, I can do this. It's going to be great.
Many of us spend our evenings replaying work arguments or situations that happened in our heads. You call this rumination, and you say it's like picking a scab off of an emotional wound. Why doesn't this kind of mulling lead to solutions? And what's a better way to retrain our brain and switch that off?
It's an extraordinarily common thing. If people think back to a moment at work. Some people have to think back 5 hours. Some people have to think back a week or a month. But think back to, something happened at work that really, really irritated you, that really offended you because a worker was so rude, coworker was so rude to you in a meeting. Your boss really chewed you out in front of the team, and you were like embarrassed and annoyed. This person got all the recognition for a project you worked on together, and you felt so much resentment. There was a bullying, there was harassment, there was something like that. When those things happen, we take them home.
Yeah.
You probably got home and spent the whole evening, I wish I would have said that. I wish I would have just, I just think about their face in that meeting. I wish I would have just said A, B, C, and D. Or I should give them a piece of my mind. You can spin around it the entire evening. And spin we do. We think about it in ways that are very unproductive. We really just focus on the insult of it, on the distress of it, on the upset of it. Whatever it is, that's where our focus is, on the emotional distress of whatever the nature, the anger, irritation, upset, disappointment, hurt, that event caused. And we spin, we just replay and redo and things. And all of that, it feels like we're processing in some way. It feels like we're doing something useful, but we're not, because we're not figuring anything out. We're not actually coming up with any kind of solutions or even identifying if there's a problem that we need to solve. We are truly just spinning. And what we know is that when you do that, you are flooding your body with cortisol. You're putting yourself in fight or flight. You are continuing all the stress and activation of the workday and of that incident and bringing it home, and you are certainly checked out from whatever it is you might want to be doing at home, and you're not present with your family, with whomever, your friends, with whomever, with yourself. You got to keep rewinding because you missed whatever happened on the show, or, that's what's going on. So it's actually very damaging. The more people ruminate about these kinds of upsetting events, the less likely they are to sleep well. They're more likely to eat unhealthy foods. They're predisposing themselves over time to a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. It's extraordinarily unhealthy. And especially what you're doing is you are doing a lot of unpaid overtime. And you're doing unpaid overtime in which you're actually not even getting any work done. So it's just bad all around. And when I say this to people, they go like, then I should not do that. And I'm like, I agree. That's not going to be easy because ruminations are intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
You can catch them and go like, oh, that's not good. I don't want to think about that. Turn back to whatever you're doing, and 3 minutes later, but I really could have said this. It's just very hard to stop because these are intrusive thoughts. So, but you have to take them seriously because we lose a lot of hours on these kinds of things, and it does do a lot of damage. And so, if you want to help yourself, you have to really try and think of it in a more productive way. So, your coworker was really rude or dismissive or hostile, or that you had a very difficult client that was just so unpleasant to deal with. Or one of the things that happen these days, which I hear so much about, there was a merger between two companies. Now there are two divisions, one from each company doing the exact same thing. And they all know that only one of them is going to make it. Only some of the people are going to make it. So now they have to work together with this very, very clear hostility because, it's a survival game. Now they're really in the survivor kind of thing. So there can be very, very difficult things. You want to take the step back and go, all right, is there something I need to address here? Is there something I need to figure out? Do I need to talk to this person? Do I need to think of a better strategy? If, this person took credit and didn't give me the credit for my work, do I need to address it with them? And if so, how? And if I do want to do it, what's the outcome I'm seeking and what's the best way to attain it? You're problem solving. You're actually taking the thing that's upsetting you and figuring out if something needs to be done. And if so, what needs to be done? And if once you know what, then how? And we know that will ease stress. It won't compound it like ruminating will. And it will also make the ruminations less intrusive and less urgent and less compelling because you're less upset about it. You figured it out. It's much easier to let it go at that time.
Most people think their job is stressful. I think you mentioned in the book, your client Priya mentioned 90% of her job is stressful until you introduce this exercise called the locating your job stress minds. So once she went through this exercise, you found out that only 10% of her week actually was stressful. So how does identifying these specific minds help us manage our coping mechanisms better?
So if you're anyone who's ever said, oh, wow, my job is really stressful.
Yeah.
Or other versions of it, which could be, well, I really hate my boss. My company sucks. I really dread the work week. Work is terrible. Any of those sweeping generalizations. Here's what you're doing, essentially. You are casting a shadow over your entire work week. Because if you hate your job, you hate all of it. If your boss is terrible, every minute is intolerable. If your company sucks, then any, day you spend working for them is unpleasant. And what that does is it puts you in a state of fight or flight or activation in which you're anticipating problems and stressful and bad things happening every minute of the day. And unnecessarily so, which means that you're activated, you're in fight or flight. We have not evolved to be in fight or flight all day, all the time, day after day after day after day after day after day. That was never the case when we were nomadic tribes. There were hunts, there were skirmishes, there were difficult moments, but there were discrete moments. Even 2,000 years ago, when there were battlefields on the plains and, and all of those things, like you did the battle was over at some point. You went even in modern warfare, there is R&R.
Yeah.
And here you are literally, every day is a battle. That's how your body and mind are responding because you're framing it in that way. And most importantly, it's not true. When I ask people and some people do have, very difficult, demanding jobs. But is there not a meeting that's actually low-key, maybe even fun? Can you not find anywhere in the week to take 30 minutes to have a pleasurable lunch where you can sit outside and actually just enjoy something? Is there no one there that you actually enjoy seeing and can have nice conversations with? Of course there is. And so it's not all your job that's stressful. And you have to be more nuanced in order to be healthier. You have to be more nuanced because otherwise you experience your job as so much more stressful than it actually is. But you did that by the framing.
In chapter 5, you discuss this idea of role curation or job crafting. So for somebody who feels like their manager is apathetic towards their growth, how can they use this exercise to develop their careers on their own?
So this is in part what the big, moment quiet quitting had, a few years ago.
Yeah.
It was like the work-life balance, and I'm not being developed. My employer doesn't really care about my development, which for many people are true. I'm not disputing that might not be the case. That you feel like you're not learning, you feel like you're not growing. That very well might be the case. However, the fact that your employer or your manager are not taking steps and making efforts to help you grow and learn doesn't mean that you cannot. If in whatever career you're in, look at the ladder. What's the next rung? What are the skill sets that you need to advance to it? What's the experience you need to advance to it? Who are the people you need to know? What are the tools you need to be proficient at? And once you've identified those, how can you find ways to acquire some of that experience, to get experience on some of those tools, to do some of those things? How can you curate your role so that you can get some of those things? Now, maybe there's a colleague that does some of the things that, in a different department, but they use this software that you probably should, can you go and say, hey, can I join you? I'd like to shadow and learn that through you. Maybe there's a skill set that, and your boss isn't coming and saying like, you need to learn this, but if you go to your boss and say, hey, there's a class I can take, it's only, 1 hour, if the company paid for it, then I would be able to then be much more efficient in helping you do blah, 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 blah. Managers, many, many managers, they're not going to take the time necessarily to seek out and to give thought to, let me see how I can help you do. But if you come to them with a clear plan in a way that might actually benefit them, they're not going to object to it. They'll be like, fine. It even shows initiatives. We don't think of trying that. So it's about being much more proactive. Don't wait around. If your job is not doing it, don't wait around for them to start feeling like, let's make sure your career development is useful. Do it. Figure it out for yourself. Make it happen on your own.
You wrote a statement that I think many people are going to resonate with, and it highlights what your comment earlier about we're working a lot of overtime and we're not getting paid for it. You said, our workday only ends when we stop thinking about work. And a lot of us are always on. We're an always on workforce because we're connected to email and chat and just we're accessible at all times. You introduced this red light, green light technique for managing after hours emails. How can we use this exercise to take back control of our personal time?
So I just want to set up the problem a little differently. So what a lot of people say to me is, I only have to respond to one email in the evening, except I get 100. And I don't know which one that is. So I have to read them all.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's not just that, you're constantly having to respond to emails. There might not be one, but you don't know it until you go through them. You might not need to respond to any of them. But still you have to check. And so every time, and every few minutes, you're looking at your phone like, let me check. Let me check. And it just demolishes your ability to enjoy your evening, to have an evening, to be focused on whatever is going on. And the research tells us that, what's really important is this feeling of autonomy, that we need to feel that, okay, work day, work was in control, work was in charge. But the evening I am. In the evening, it should be about what I want to do. It's my time. I should be able to decide what I'm doing. And if I have to constantly check emails throughout the evening or Slack messages or whatever the thing is, then it's not in my control, and it's very, very demoralizing, and it adds to stress, and it adds to a lot of different feelings because it's very upsetting. But again, feelings of control, of autonomy, they're psychological. It's not about a reality. It's about the reality that you experience. So what I suggest the exercise is about, then frame what the evening is about for you. It might be about, I'm going to have dinner with my partner and then we're going to watch a show. Or I'm just going to binge these episodes of the thing that I wanted to do. Or I'm going to organize my closet, such and such, whatever the thing is. Or I'm out to dinner with friends, whatever the thing. Frame, first of all, this is the main event. Call it the main event. The main event is this. During that main event, I will have an intermission. Like there sometimes used to be in the movies or there is in shows. There'll be an intermission. During that intermission, at the time of my choosing, it'll be between the episodes. It'll be after dinner. It'll be before another round of drinks at the bar. I will take the 10, 15 minutes to go through my emails, to go through the messages, see what I have to respond to and respond if I need. And that'll be like the red light to pause. And now it's the intermission. The show's on pause. And then when I'm done, the show resumes and I'm back to the main event. And framing it that way in your head will allow you to maintain this feeling of autonomy. It'll feel less disruptive and less intrusive to have to do the things you have to do because you're doing them all together in a very specific time, in a very specific way of your choosing. And by the way, if your manager says to you, like, well, you only responded at 9:45, I sent the email at 8 o'clock. Then your answer should be, I know, I was busy, I was indisposed. And if your manager has the A, lack of boundaries, B, intrusiveness, and 3, nerve, to say why, what were you doing, I would like to remind you that you do not owe them an explanation to be accountable in whatever you're doing in your private life. You might have been at a show, you might have been getting a massage, you might have been swimming, you might have been having an intimate moment with your partner, none of which you have to explain to anyone from work who's rude enough to ask you to account for your minute-by-minute activities after work.
I was struck by your concept in chapter 7 about self-neglect and overworkers, where we might skip the gym, eat junk food, stop seeing friends. And you talk about canaries in the coal mine. How can we identify our personal early warning signs before we hit a full-blown crisis of self-neglect?
See, this is one of the things that happens when work kind of takes over our lives, and one of the ways in which it does. Our focus is on our work. Our focus, we become so focused on our work, we take the eye of us, of our life, of our health. And, I do a lot of Zoom sessions these days.
Yeah.
And it's very different than when I used to have an office, because I get to see the home environment or the office environment. And sometimes people will blur their background, and sometimes they'll forget, and sometimes when you move a certain way, the blur, and sometimes I'll get a look behind people, and I'll be like, yikes! Yeah. Where are you working? I hope that's not a bedroom. Or whatever it is, because, wow, the disarray. Like the dead plants over there and the piles of this, like you have let things go.
Yep.
And you have let aspects of your life go. And is that a dead light bulb? Well, why is that fixture hanging? Like, it's like all these things. And because, no, you mean to get to it. You will get to it. Piles of mail, like all kinds of stuff I see. And it's like all that stuff of life that you're not on top of, that you've let go. And that can really accumulate. And one of the most common ways this happens, and to me, the most upsetting when I hear it, is I'm in the position now that when I work with people at all seniority levels, I ask them this question, which feels to me insulting that I'm asking, and yet experience has told me you should ask. And here's the question. And anyone listening, please ask yourself this question. When is the last time you had a checkup? When's the last time you saw the dentist? When's the last time you had blood work done? When's the last time, if you're a woman, you've seen a gynecologist? And if you have to blink hard and really, really think about it, it's been too long. And you are neglecting your health in the most basic ways. Blood work is super simple. Might be scary for some people, but it's super simple. It's a very great first way to detect if something is wrong. And we know when it comes to health, whatever is wrong, if there's something wrong, hopefully not, but whatever it is, the sooner you find it, the more treatable that thing is. So it is super important. We know with the dentist, the cavity will turn into a root canal and be more painful and more expensive. So, but that is one of the first things that goes, I'm just too busy. I have to keep pushing it off. And it's remarkable, but it's very, very common. And so the canaries in the coal mine is like the best place to intervene when it comes to neglect of that kind is where it starts. Like, what are the first things that tend to go when you're in your busy period versus when you're on top of things? And it's characteristic. It's usually the same thing for all of us. It's not the same thing for all of us, but the same thing within us, the same thing we let go first each time. And once you know what it is for you, you can spot, oh, I'm doing that now. Oops, not making the bed anymore. Now it's been 2 weeks. Oh, lots of dishes over there. And the pile of mail is growing. Whatever the thing is, it can alert you intervene now. It will be much easier. You'll have to expend much less effort to correct the ship now than if you let it slip, because it is slipping, you know where it's going.
You write about the collateral damage that work stress does to our families. You suggest this empathy exercise where we might visualize our partner's day before we even walk through the front door. How would this help change the vibe of our evenings if we went through this exercise?
So, we belong to many tribes in our life, right? Like we have a work tribe, that the team that we work with, we might belong to a church, a mosque, synagogue, and have a house of worship tribe, a cultural tribe, a friend group from college or whatever the thing is. And we have our families, should be our primary tribe. But when we're in different places, we respond to those different places by affiliating with the tribe we're hanging out with. Well, the places we're at most is work. That's where we spend most of our days, most of the hours of our lives, truly. And that's the tribe. And, the team building exercise, we work as one, etc., etc. When you come home, you need to switch that tribal allegiance. Like you need to remind yourself that, okay, now it's the home tribe. It was always the most important tribe, but certainly is now that I'm coming home. But that switch doesn't happen automatically. And so a lot of the time, you're in work mode. You come home with a fog of war still hovering around you. And then, your partner wants you to help with dinner or do the homework with the kids or whatever the thing is. And that feels like it just makes you feel resentful, and you don't want to feel resentful. It just makes you feel that way because it's like, because they're still registering as outsiders. You haven't switched that kind of allegiance. And so we have to be more intentional in how we think even of our return home or the closing of the laptop if you're working from home at the end of the day and rising into the home life. And sometimes it's useful to do an empathy exercise to kind of just remind yourself. And it's one of the tools. There's a lot of different tools I give in that regard in the book, but to remind yourself, like, this is what it's about. This is what I should be thinking. This is who actually matters. Again, it's all these things that we know, and so many of us say, well, we know it. But the fact that we know it doesn't mean that that's what's primed in our thoughts right now. It doesn't mean that that's where our mind is right now. So yes, we have to do it more deliberately.
To wrap things up, Guy, you've given us a ton of great strategies throughout this conversation, and the book has even more than what we've covered. But chapter 13 really hits on how we spend our precious time away from the office. You mentioned that not all vacations are actually restorative, and you introduced this idea that I've never heard of before called triple dipping. You give an example of the holiday, like had a triple dip on one holiday, but for somebody who only has like a single weekend to recover from what was a brutal week, how can they use that triple dipping method to extract a lot more happiness than just the 48 hours they might have over a weekend?
So look, by the way, this is something I've been practicing for a long time, and I love it. In other words, if you have just a weekend away or a staycation, doesn't really matter, but you're looking forward, so it's not just that weekend. What you should do is you should look forward to it, get excited about it, think about what you'll do, jazz yourself up so that when you're thinking about it, even if it's 2 or 3 weeks away, oh, I have that weekend, I can't wait. The more you think about it, the more joy that kind of brings you. Before you left the house, it can be a couple of weeks before. And it's like, why should I spend time think about the weekend that I haven't had yet? Because it'll make you happy. It'll make you look forward to it. Our mind responds really strongly to the things we anticipate, as well as to the events themselves. And sometimes the anticipation garners an even a stronger response in terms of neurotransmitters even than the actual event does. So you can really, that's the first dip. You can be dipping and enjoying this vacation before you left, even if it's a staycation. You can, before you even left. Then when you're there, you can be very present and mindful and always build in time to document. Don't assume that, because some people, all they do is, they get there, let me take all the pictures. Wait, before you take the pictures, did you enjoy the thing? I've been to so many places in the world where I see tourists come, really beautiful, beautiful places. And they're so busy finding the right Instagram moment that they're not looking around at all. They're not looking around. They're not present. They're not enjoying it. They're just trying to figure out how they can show it to their friends later. What a miss. First, enjoy. Then document. You can do both. So that's the second dip. Third dip is once you've documented, then arrange that media. There's so many free apps and easy and cheap ways to kind of create a little booklet, create a little movie, create a little something for you. Not you want to put it on social media, go ahead. But for you primarily. And then you can spend a week afterwards reliving via that documentation, via the media that you took. And that's the triple dip. You get, oh, that was so great. Because often we get back and 3 hours later, we're in the office, after 3 hours in the office, we're like, wait, what vacation? But even 3 hours later, and after the office, get home, look at the pictures again. Looking at the pictures, looking at videos gets you back into that mindset. So that's the triple dip. You can extend the weekend vacation into like a month of pre, post, all of it. So, and take advantage of it. It's free.
Guy, congratulations on the new book. It's called Mind Over Grind, How to Break Free When Work Hijacks Your Life. It came out February 10th, and I always try to highlight content on this show, which is very actionable. And this book is packed with exercises, assessments, and all sorts of things that are going to really help a lot of people. So well done on this, and thanks for joining me on the show. Where can people learn more about you, your work, or anything else you're up to?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you to listeners who made it this far for listening. People can find me at guywinch.com. That's my website, GUIWINCH.com, where they can get information about where to get the book, my other activities, podcasts, what I'm doing, writings, etc. And they can follow me on social media. Links to all my social media are there as well.
My guest today has been Guy Winch. Thanks for coming on, Guy.
Thank you for having me.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Xenium HR or the host, Brandon Laws. The material and information presented on Transform Your Workplace is for general information and educational purposes only. Xenium HR or the host, Brandon Laws, does not necessarily endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent. Discretion is advised. Please work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs.